Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's EcoCast, entitled Tool Time, the tools that supercharge a VMware environment. We have a great show lined up for you today. We have Druva, Gigamon, and Synology that are all going to be presenting information for you to learn from today around how to make your VMware environments even better than they already are. But before we get started, we have a number of housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, my name is Scott Lowe. I'll be your moderator for today's event. And you're going to win some great prizes. We have Amazon gift cards we're giving away throughout the event. And there's some important prize terms and conditions you need to take a look at before we get started. And we're going to talk about those in just a second. We have questions. If you have questions, our presenters have answers. Please use the QA button in your console to ask any questions that might be on your mind. And as you'll learn on the next slide, you're going to be potentially paid to ask a great question. Then we have social media. If you want to tweet about today's event, please use hashtag #ATMEcocast, and we'll be making sure that we keep an eye on that during today's event. And there's a number of resources that you can take a look at today under the Handouts tab in your console. If you take a look at the Handouts tab, you'll notice there's some great information from all of today's presenters, as well as information about Actual Tech Media's prize terms and conditions, our full event calendar, and information on how to join the Gorilla Guide Book Club. As I mentioned, you'll be entered today to win one of 3 $500 Amazon gift cards. You must be in live attendance to qualify, and the winner will be announced live by the moderator. If you're listening to this event on demand, we're sorry, but those prizes have already been given away, so you won't be eligible to win, but you'll still be eligible to learn some great information. If you have if you win a prize, again, you must be present. You do have the option to make a donation to a selected charity. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media to be eligible to win. That's after the fact. And we'll reach out to you after the event if you have won a prize. We'll also announce it live. And again, if you want information about our full prize details, please visit the link that you see on your screen. One thing I do want to mention is if you ask a great question, it might be worth $50. So we are going to give a $50 Amazon gift card to someone who asks a great question today. We select that winner, and we'll contact you after the event. But again, winners must meet our Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you'd rather give rather than get, if you win a gift card today, you have the option to donate it to a selected charity. The charities you see on your screen are ones that we've supported in the past and are really important for, obviously, a lot of reasons that you can see based on their names. Particularly in the world today, One Tree Planted, the Diane Fossey Gorilla Guide Fund are ones that are near and dear to our hearts, especially with our Gorilla Guide book series. So please, if you're interested, let us know when we reach out to you that you prefer to donate to charity, and we will donate the value of your prize to your selected charity in your name. And again, if you're on social media and you'd like to tweet about today's EcoCast, use the hashtag #ATMEcocast. And follow us at Actual Tech Media, and you can follow me at @OtherScottLowe on Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe to all of our various channels, including our YouTube channel, Facebook, and our 10 on Tech podcast. And this is a face you will know, a voice you will know. David Davis will be today's guest speaker, and I'm going to get him queued up now. David, you're up.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be on the EcoCast chatting here about VMware infrastructures. So I'm here to talk to you about how your legacy VMware infrastructure, most likely, I'm going to bet, needs an upgrade. At many companies out there, the VMware infrastructure is what really powers the heart and soul of the company. It runs your most critical Tier 1 applications, and for most of us, it's been doing that for many years. Perhaps back when you implemented it, it was the state-of-the-art VMware infrastructure, but today, I'm going to bet that it's time for an upgrade. And not just any old upgrade, but it's time to supercharge your VMware infrastructure. I mean, VMware provides a great solution in terms of a hypervisor and centralized management, but there's a reason for the VMware ecosystem. That's because every good VMware infrastructure needs a variety of third-party tools to really function and not just get by, but perform at an optimal level that these Tier 1 applications deserve. So let's now talk about some of those tools that make up the VMware infrastructure. For the most part, VMware provides the basics of what you need: basic performance monitoring, perhaps some level of basic data protection with vSphere replication, for example. But like I said, in many cases, you need to look to third party solutions to create what they call a best of breed data center. I'm talking about things like data protection. We all have to back up our critical data. As they say, you need 3 copies of your data for real data protection, with at least 2 on different pieces of media and at least 1 kept off site. That's not just built into VMware. You need an enterprise grade data protection solution to do that. And while you're doing so, why not integrate it with a disaster recovery tool so you can really have both of these most critical applications together? So you need data protection, you need disaster recovery. If you have a ransomware attack or you have an accidental data loss, you're going to want that data back immediately. Your job and the future of the company could be on the line. And then you need shared storage. The first time I was ever introduced to shared storage was when we brought up our VMware ESX infrastructure back then, and we said, hey, to take advantage of some of these really cool features like vSphere high availability and distributed resource scheduler, we need shared storage. We need SAN or NAS. And today, most of the time, that's going to be flash storage or hybrid storage or hyperconvergence of some kind. Then you also need monitoring, performance, and troubleshooting tools. Like we said, these critical applications need to be up and running at all times, so you need to make sure that the network is performing optimally, and not just the physical network, but also the virtual network in the vSphere infrastructure. You need to ensure that the storage is performing well, and since that's shared storage and it's accessed via NFS or iSCSI, that data is going across the network as well. And then, of course, finally, your compute, CPU, and memory. You want to try to prevent problems before they happen. You want to plan for future growth. And should you have a problem, you need to be able to identify the root cause rapidly and remediate. You need efficiency in your management platform for this entire infrastructure. And today, we really want some sort of cloud portability. And I know that's at a high level. It could be for your data protection or your disaster recovery. It could be for your workloads, being able to migrate your virtual machines into the cloud and back again. We need this kind of flexibility, agility, scalability in our data center, and the cloud provides that. And finally, automation. You want to automate as much as you can to save you time and save the company money. So that's my list of the top tools, the requirements that you need to complement your VMware vSphere infrastructure. But what if you want to take it to the next level and supercharge your VMware environment? How do you go about it? Well, you need crazy efficient and performance servers. Start at the hardware. That's where the VMware hypervisor is running. That's where your applications are running. That's your CPU and memory. But from there, you're also going to need super fast and super innovative storage. Today, that typically means flash storage, but it's not just the storage hardware, it's the storage software that goes on top. That storage array needs to integrate with your vSphere environment to provide array integrated snapshots and to provide VMware vSphere array assisted storage operations. Beyond that, some really cool storage that you'll learn about, like on the event today, even has integrated data protection and much more. So look out for storage innovations. From there, you need super smart software. I'm talking about intelligent virtual network optimization and security. You need to be able to easily tap into the vSphere network, find out exactly what's going on, who's talking to who, what traffic is flowing where, how much bandwidth is it using, what sort of latency is happening, and be able to pull all that data into a network performance analysis and troubleshooting tool to ensure that the network is always running at 100%. And then, of course, optimized data protection and disaster recovery. The data protection infrastructure no longer has to be a giant backup appliance that you roll into the data center with a dolly. It can be smart software that replicates your VMware virtual machines offsite to the cloud and can easily bring them back up should you have a disaster. And then finally, just innovative scalability and availability all around. These tier 1 applications can't go down, and this VMware infrastructure needs to be able to scale up over time. Like you, I'm excited to learn about some of the most innovative technology solutions on the EcoCast today that can help you and me supercharge our VMware environment. So thanks for having me on and enjoy the show.
And before we get started today, we're going to ask you a question. What's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? Is it something pretty immediate, a little bit, medium term, longer term, or you're just not sure? We'd like to hear from you about what you're looking at in terms of updating, supercharging your VMware environment. And shortly we'll be hearing from Synology, Dave Russ, who is a Senior Technical Account Manager with Synology, but I'm going to leave this poll question up for just another few seconds so we can get as many people responding as possible. This is great information for us to learn more about our audience and where you have needs so we can bring you even better events in the future. All right, we're going to move on to our first presenter. It's Mr. Dave Russ, Senior Technical Account Manager with Synology. But before we hear from Dave, Synology wants to ask you a question. Have you ever lost virtual machine data to ransomware? And the answer is yes, or I haven't personally, but my company has, or no. And this is an important question because, it's, I think probably sometime in most of our careers, we've all experienced some kind of data loss, whether or not that's actual virtual machine data or not is probably a different situation. But I know for a fact that in my IT career, yeah, we've had some data loss events, which is never a fun thing to have to deal with. And as soon as we have some answers to this question, we will move on and we'll get started with Dave's presentation. We'll leave it up for about 5 or 10 more seconds, and then we'll move on. And don't forget, we'll be giving away some Amazon gift cards shortly. And please, if you have questions, I want to remind everyone, please ask them, and you'll be entered into a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. And we're going to move on with Dave's presentation.
Hello and welcome to another Synology webinar. Today we're going to be showing you how to create a business continuity plan for your VMware environment using Synology. I'll be your speaker today. My name is Dave Russ and I'm a Senior Technical Account Manager with Synology. Throughout my time with Synology, I've been able to work with hundreds of different businesses to choose the hardware and software that will both solve their problem and fit their budget. One customer that we worked with, a communication service provider, was hosting 90 VMs on their ESXi host. They needed a place to store the data for those VMs, and they also needed a way to back up the VMs both locally and off-site. Luckily, Synology has software to check all of these boxes. So first we set up a high availability cluster, 2 devices that work together to ensure that uptime is maximized. And we use this cluster to store the data for the VMs that we're actively running. Next, we set up a local backup to a Synology device. We set up snapshots for the backups and then replicated those snapshots to a remote location to protect against local disasters. The customer was able to solve all of their problems with our software, and because they used Synology, they didn't have to pay any licensing fees. Today, I'm going to show you how to mimic this setup in your own environment. We're going to create a local backup for your data. Then I'm going to show you how to recover that information. Finally, I'm going to show you how to protect that data further by replicating it to a remote site. All right, first step, let's create the local backup to the Synology device. First, we'll have to figure out our hardware. So Synology has a wide range of products which can store from just a few terabytes to over a petabyte worth of space. And within that range, we've also got varied performance options to make sure that you get exactly what you need at a price that you're going to end up being happy with. Now, no matter which Synology device you do pick, all of them will use our operating system called Disk Station Manager, or DSM for short. With DSM, you have the ability to download over 100 different applications to both manage and to back up your data. Now, in your current environment, you've got data scattered across multiple different platforms. You've got PCs, physical servers, virtual machines, And you probably also use cloud services like Microsoft 365. Now, it'd be great to back up and manage all of this information from a single source. Now, that's where Synology comes in. Synology's Active Backup for Business gives you a single location where you can store and manage backups from all of those other devices, your PCs, servers, virtual machines. And although it's not really the focus of this presentation, we also have Active Backup for Microsoft 365 and Active Backup for G Suite to protect your data that is up in the cloud. Probably the most interesting backups are the virtual machine backups. With Active Backup for Business, you can set up agentless backups, so you only need the IP address of the host, your username, and your password. All of your VM backups will be globally deduplicated, so you'll save on space by not needing the same blocks of information twice, and all of this is license-free. No subscriptions, no strings attached. Once you buy into the Synology ecosystem, we've got you covered. So enough of me just talking about all this stuff. Let me go ahead into it and show you how to set up the local backup. All right, so here we are in Disk Station Manager, and I'm going to go ahead into Active Backup for Business. So we go right into our overview screen, and we can see how many PCs, physical servers, and virtual machines we're actually backing up. And we have a backup calendar up here, so we can see the last 5 weeks worth of activity. These green circles show that everything was successful on that day. And then we've got some of these that are showing up in orange, which are giving us some type of warning. And we've got some that are showing up in red, which showed that some of our backup tasks failed on that day. So I'll click into this just to show you. You can come right in and you can see which of the backup tasks actually failed, so you can remedy that situation super quickly. Back in our overview tab, we can also see the deduplication. So we see the original size of these different files, 270 gigabytes worth of virtual machines. And after deduplication, we're down to 111 gigabytes through the virtual machines, PCs, and physical servers. So a lot of space saved there. We've got tabs on the left here for your PCs, your physical servers, and our focus is going to be on virtual machines. So we can see we're already connected to our host. We can see all of the virtual machines down here. And if we wanted to connect to a different host, we could go to Manage Hypervisor, click Add, just put in the IP address, the account and password, click Apply, and you are connected to that other host, and it would show up separately from this one. Now, if we want to back up our virtual machines, all we have to do is click on one of them and click Create Task. Choose the shared folder that we want to save to, click Next. Choose the virtual machines that we want to back up and click Next. And we can see that we automatically enable changed block tracking. You can also enable application-aware backups, compression, encryption, and we've also got backup verification. So this will actually take the backup, and it will actually boot up the virtual machine, and you can take a video of that virtual machine booting up, and as long as everything goes okay, you will see that green circle showing that everything's all right. Otherwise, you'll get some sort of warning saying, hey, there might be an issue with the actual backup. And we'll click Next here. And now we can either choose to manually back up, or we can run a scheduled backup as well. And the last thing here is the retention policy. So we can choose to only keep a certain number of our versions of this information. This is really very much up to you. And the last screen actually here is choosing permissions for this backup task. So we can actually also use domain users, and I can go down here and I can select myself and then just go Next, review all of this information, and then we would just have to click Apply here. So I'll cancel out of that because we actually have a task already created for our backup. You can see we had a recent successful backup here. So I will go ahead back into the VMware tab here, and that's really it. That is how you create the task. That is how you back up these virtual machines using Active Backup for Business. Let's go ahead back into the slideshow and continue on there. Okay, great. So we've got our local backup set up. Now, what happens if and when we need to restore that information to the VM host? You'll be glad to see that we've got a bunch of different options when recovering our data. Your servers and VMs are the most flexible, allowing you to instantly restore them to the host, to another platform entirely, or even to instantly restore them to the Synology device itself. I want to focus in on what's likely the most common use case, which is restoring to your VM host. So imagine it's 11 a.m. and one of your VMs is accidentally deleted or gets corrupted somehow, and you need to instantly get that VM up and running. Luckily, you can instantly point the VM host to the backup stored on the Synology device. The only recovery time you'll need is the amount of time that it takes to boot up the VM image from your VM host. So let me show you what this instant restoration looks like through the Synology software. Okay, so here we are back in Active Backup for Business again. We've got our DAVR demo VM that we're going to be playing around with here. So we can see in task list here, this is the task here, DAVR demo, and we see that we had a successful backup on the 9th. So what we can do is go over to ESXi, and I'll show you kind of what this looks like. We've got our virtual machine, which we can click into here, and we've got Windows running on that virtual machine. So what I'll do is I'll power that off here, and then I'll just switch over to vSphere so you can get an idea of what this looks like while that is shutting down. So we've got our DAVR demo over here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in Actions, and we're going to imagine that somebody goes down here and they just delete this VM. They completely wipe it off the face of the earth, and it's completely gone. So in a normal situation, there really wouldn't be any way to recover from this, but since we have this backup task that we've already created, all that we have to do is go right here, click on the virtual machine, and click Restore. And we want to restore this to VMware vSphere. Click Next. And we're going to do an instant restore. We're going to imagine that this is during normal business hours. We need to get this backup immediately. So I'll click Next. I'll choose that backup version that we have here. If I had other backup versions, they would show up separately down below this one. I'll click Next. We want to restore it to the original location. Perfect. And then I'm going to have it automatically power on after restoration. And I'll just click Apply here. And we're automatically going to be taken to this Restore Status tab. And we see that it is actively restoring, doing this instant restore. And we're already at 98%, 99%. I'll show you what this looks like in ESXi. I'm going to cancel out of this and just show you, hey, DAVR demo is already up right here. In vSphere, same idea. We've got DAVR demo. And we can see, I'm going to go ahead and click into here, that it's already booting up. So we've already got this pointed to our backup, and it's just instant restoring right to that device. Now, it's fully complete, you know, everything's booting up. Now, for those vSphere users out there, users who are licensed for vMotion, what you can do is you can then migrate the virtual machine. So you can just click Migrate, you choose your data store that you want to connect it to. So the one that it's on right now is perfect for me. And then just hit Apply, and this will not be instant. So this is after your instant restore, but you'll be able to very easily migrate that data and have that be a more permanent solution for you after your instant restore is taken care of. So there we go. We're already instant restoring the virtual machine that we otherwise would have just had completely deleted and had no way of getting it back. And now we are already doing a full restore from our instant restore with the help of vMotion here. So that's all I have to show for the restore. Let's go back into that slide deck. All right, so we've got step one down, which was locally backing up our VMs and then recovering in the case of a disaster. Now, to provide additional protection, we need an offsite backup that will keep our data safe in the case of a local disaster. Now, among the issues that we're protecting against by going offsite are natural disasters, accidental deletion of backups, corruption of data, power outages, ransomware, just to name a few. There's plenty more out there. And the software that we're going to use to get off-site is Snapshot Replication. So we can set this up to take snapshots of our shared folders and LUNs up to every 5 minutes, and then we can easily replicate to our offsite device, once again, up to every 5 minutes. With snapshot replication, we can take instant snapshots and use incremental backups to only sync the changed data. This means you'll have an extremely minimal impact on the performance of your device because snapshots will be super quick. You'll have the ability to quickly recover entire folders or LUNs. And of course, you'll have the ability to fail over to your offsite device in case something happens to your local one. Let's dive in again so I can show you how to get those snapshots set up and we can get replicated to our secondary backup. Okay, here we are once again in DSM, and I will go to Snapshot Replication. You can see that we start off in the Overview tab, and we're getting a warning here. So once again, you will absolutely get notified if there's anything that even might need your attention. You can just click in Details and look further into that. I'm going to skip that for now. We'll go to the Snapshots tab here. And so if you wanted to take a snapshot of one of these folders, all you'd have to do is go in here, click on the folder, go to Settings, and then you can set up a schedule to start taking those snapshots so you have historical versions of where these files were at a previous point in time. So we've already got that set up, and actually we already have replication set up. So in replication here, imagine we took these snapshots of this folder and we need to replicate the information. All we'd have to do is click on this here and click Create, go to Next. And we want to replicate it to a remote device. We'd click Next again, and then all we'd have to do is type in the IP address, the username and password of the destination device, and click Next, and then we would be able to further configure the replication task. So we already have one here for this device, so I'm just going to go into Info here. And you can see that we've got it set up with our source server here and our destination server here. You can see the last successful run and then the next time it's expected to run. We can also go into statistics and we can see the recent successful runs and how much data went through on these successful runs and also how long it took for these different runs. So we can see we had a long backup on the 5th of this month, and this was most likely the initial backup. And then since then, it's been very small changes for these snapshots because it really didn't require that much data because we're using that change block tracking. So once we've got that replicated to the other device, we can also use the recovery tab here. So if we needed to, let's say, recover a previous version of this folder, all we'd have to do is click Recover. We get a whole bunch of different versions for these backups. So let's imagine we have to go back to the 5th here around midnight. What we can do is we can click on that version, we can click Browse, and it'll actually bring up in File Station the folders and files that we actually backed up. So we can see what it was like during this version before we do the restore. So we know exactly what we're going to get. Once we've confirmed that we have everything we want, we make sure it's selected, we click Action, and we restore to this snapshot. So it's super, super easy to get back the data from whichever version you need to get back to. And once again, that is really it. So we were able to take our snapshot for this folder. We were able to replicate to an offsite device. And then if we needed to, we could recover that information. But let's go ahead back into the slide deck. Now that we've got our local backup and our offsite backup, we've got one more way that we can protect our data, and that's with a cloud storage service. Our Hyper Backup software works with Amazon S3, Microsoft Azure, Google Drive, and other major providers. We've also created our own cloud storage platform that we call Synology C2. You can use the same software you're familiar with, Hyper Backup, and easily back up data to our cloud service. Unlike other large cloud services, we don't charge you extra just to get your data back in the case of an emergency. In an effort to protect your data from being accessed by third parties, your data can also be encrypted before it's uploaded to C2. Once again, let's dive straight in and look at how easy it is to back up to Synology C2. All right, so here we are back in DSM for the last time in this presentation, and I'm going to go straight into Hyper Backup. As you can see, we've already got a bunch of tasks here, including this active backup for business, C2 backup. So imagine we want to create a new task. We'd go into the bottom left and click Create, and we want to create a data backup task. We've got a whole bunch of different options here, including Synology C2 cloud backups. You can also back up to a server that supports rsync, or you can go down here and back up to S3 or Azure or any of these other options. I'm going to cancel out of this since we do already have our task created and show you some of the options for Hyper Backup. So as you can see, one of the first things here is our folders. So we have a choice of which folders we actually want to back up. Currently, we're only doing this active backup for business, but of course, you could back up your whole device doing this. You also have options for applications. If you wanted to back up your settings for these different applications, you could absolutely do that. And then in settings here, we have a couple of notification options. We got bandwidth limits that you could set if this is going to be a long backup and things like that. And then you can set up your schedule. So there's no schedule on this one that we have set, but you can run it on specific days, or you could run it on a specific date. We've also got a rotation here. So we're currently using the Smart Recycle, which will keep more versions for that are more recent, but then as you get farther and farther back, it keeps less and less versions. So this is one that I like to kind of default to if I'm not really sure what I'm going to need, is just use Smart Recycle here. And then Target just shows us exactly where we are actually backing up to. So once again, this is Synology C2. So this is our backup, and then all we have to do is click Backup Now, and then it will start creating another backup. And there we are. That's it. That's all we got to show you for the cloud backup. We make it super easy with Hyper Backup. Well, I hope you learned a bunch from seeing our software in action. Please do reach out to us to learn more. We can work with you to build out solutions. We can provide personalized trainings from technical account managers like myself. And we can provide some partner exclusive trainings and incentives for you resellers out there. Thank you very much for joining us, and please do stay safe out there. And feel free to stick around for a brief Q&A.
Dave, thank you for that fantastic presentation. We do have a number of questions. Before you get started with those, though, we'd like to put a poll question up on the screen for our audience to answer. And this is: what additional information would you like to learn about the Synology solution? Would you like to receive about the Synology solution? Dave, while that question's on the screen, do you want to run Q&A?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for throwing it over this way. Yeah, we got quite a few questions in during the presentation, so I'll just run through a few of those. Don't want to run over time at all here, but definitely some great questions. So I'll start off with the first question from Gabriel, which is, what brings me to a Synology instead of one of our competitors? Is it more for the licensing cost, or is it the hardware, being lower cost, or things like that? And so my answer to that is really multifaceted. So the fact that we don't charge for licensing for our software is definitely huge. The fact that our hardware is generally much lower cost than a lot of our competitors, it is great, and we do like to let people know that they can save a lot of money. But the user experience of our devices, hopefully you saw in some of those demos there, the user experience is just fantastic. I mean, it really is so much easier to use Synology. It really is easy to restore data if you ever need to restore data to or from a Synology device. So we do really pride ourselves on our software. And speaking of which, we pride ourselves on our software. We also pride ourselves on our support. So one other question here was, for remote backup, how available is the customer support? And we do have 24-hour support by phone, chat, or through support tickets. So you can feel free to reach out to our support team if you do have any issues with the Synology device. If you need any assistance with the software, feel free to reach out to them. Another good question here, is there a minimum hardware requirement for active backup for business? And the answer to that is yes. We do actually have a minimum requirement. We actually have the requirements listed on our site, so you can go to basically the Active Backup for Business page and then click into Applied Models, and it will show you exactly the models that are basically offer Active Backup for Business. So there's quite a lot, if it's basically in our Plus series or above, so it's even those small, little 2-bay devices, as long as they're in the Plus series. But definitely go to our site and check to make sure that the model that you're looking for is on that list. Let me see here. Okay, is the backup program included with DSM, which is our operating system, once again, Disk Station Manager, / the Synology device? So the answer to that question is the software that we showed today is not pre-installed on the operating system. So you would have to log in, you'd have to go into our package center, but that said, you can install it for free. All you have to do is click on it. So we don't want to have basically bloatware on your system. We want you to install the things that you find useful and the programs that you need, but there's, once again, no additional cost for those. We did get a lot of different questions about cost and pricing, and hey, is it really license free? And that's not unexpected, because it's so rare, I think, in this space for this type of software to come included in the cost of the unit. But I can rest assured, it is free. You can any of the software that you saw today, you absolutely can use for free. Hyper Backup, Snapshot Replication, and all of the Active Backup suite. And I think probably I'll take one last question here. I don't want to run over time, but we had one other question about Active Backup for Microsoft 365. So I just wanted to kind of repeat. What we looked at today was Active Backup for Business, and using that with VMware. But we also have Active Backup for Microsoft 365 and Active Backup for G Suite. So if you did want to back up that cloud data and obviously be able to restore that back up to the cloud, you can take advantage of that software as well. So once again, I'm just being mindful of time here, so I will go ahead and throw it back. And any of the other questions we'll be sure to respond to individually. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dave, for those great answers, and thank you again for the great presentation. We are going to give away our first gift card of today's event. The winner of the first Amazon $500 gift card is Michael Cairns from New Mexico. Michael will be reaching out to you after the event today with information on how to collect your gift card. And next up, we have Druva with our friend Max Lindauer, Corporate Sales Engineer with Druva. Max, how you doing?
Doing great, Scott. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. Are you ready to take it away?
Ready to take it away. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
So thanks, everybody. Beautiful. So thanks, everybody, for joining. My name is Max Lindauer. I'm one of the sales engineers here at Druva. And today I'm going to talk to you about how Druva is really changing the game when it comes to data protection and how we can radically improve your data protection posture through a cloud-native SaaS platform like Druva. Whether you're using VMware on-premise or you're looking to AWS to run VMC, Druva is a certified platform to protect both VMware on-prem as well as VMC. And obviously VMC being that software-defined data center in AWS's infrastructure that gives you the same operational consistency that you're used to on-prem with vSphere, portability of being able to convert VMs on-premise into the cloud, whether using like vMotion or hybrid link mode, and API integrations to the many different feature sets and elastic benefits that AWS provides. And so to talk a bit about the benefits of VMware Cloud on AWS, right? Mentioned a few of them already. Things like that operational consistency, the managed service, using the same user interface from the VMware premise on-prem as well as in the cloud, giving you portability to move those applications and VMs both on-premise as well as into cloud to scale up during peak hours of business, giving you that native integration into like elastic network interfaces. And then application modernization, right? You're looking to see, decouple applications and their containers. And this is obviously possible because of the access VMC has to the native AWS services. And when you start with AWS services, I think it's important to just talk around the infrastructure and the capabilities there. So the infrastructure on AWS spans 64 availability zones in 22 different geographic regions across the world. 12 more are coming, Bahrain, Cape Town, Jakarta, Milan. And when you look at the AWS platform, the breadth of offerings are obviously vast, but there's a few specific use cases, key areas that the VMC and AWS can help provide. Whether you're using VMC as a migration to reduce your on-premise workload, as an extension to kind of have that portability, the scalability. Zozo used this during their peak winter months to scale. Of course, disaster recovery. Discovery Channel needed to implement a disaster recovery solution to protect their on-prem environment, and they used VMC on AWS with the addition of SRM. And then S&P Global uses VMC for application modernization. They migrated 150 applications to VMware Cloud on AWS in about 8 months, and they integrated all of these applications with those native AWS services that truly benefited the business there. Now, I'm going to kind of touch on where does Druva fit in all of this? How can a solution like Druva really help you modernize your data protection strategy and advance? So, like I mentioned, Druva is a 100% cloud-native SaaS platform built on top of AWS. You don't, however, need an AWS account to use Druva. Druva is a managed service that can back up and recover data no matter the source. So whether you have some remote employees looking to back up endpoints, laptops, desktops, mobile, or even cloud applications like Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, Slack, as well as, of course, what we're going to focus on today, VMware on-premise, as well as VMC, and then even AWS workloads natively within the VPC, so EC2, RDS, Redshift, DynamoDB. Of course, the focus of the platform, the main value prop is around backup and restore, around disaster recovery. But ultimately, what gets me really excited about Druva is the ability to consolidate the data across different workloads into a historical data lake. There you can do more than just restore that data. You can run scans on compliance. You can put users on legal hold, export out for e-discovery, long-term archival, analytics as well. So it's really a one-stop shop, it can be, for data protection across these different workloads, all as a service, all SaaS, all built natively on top of AWS. And so for a little bit more of like a graphic here on kind of what we can connect to with Druva. So Druva being cloud, you don't need to manage the backend storage here. We're able to connect to local data center footprints, SaaS applications, cloud workloads, laptops, desktops, mobile devices, understand what data exists across all those platforms, and then only ingest the unique block level data from point to point. So we refer to that as global source-side deduplication as well as an incremental forever approach. And both of those things just aid in efficiency of backup. Less data is ultimately transferred through the wire, less bandwidth is consumed, less cost would be incurred for things like egress. And then there is no transfer cost out of the Druva platform. We eat all ingress and egress costs. The cost to you is just either a per user license or, in the case of data center workloads, just what the post-dedupe data is that you're managing. And to go a little bit deeper into kind of how this all works, whether you have a VMware environment on AWS and VMC or on-premise or a mix of the both, will connect, only ingest unique data into the platform, and then we can build out a pre-orchestrated, predefined DR plan to fail over into your own VPC, converting those VMDK images into EBS volumes, offloading those to S3 for cost savings, and then in the event of a disaster or a need to spin up for test or dev, one click that can happen in an orchestrated manner in a sub-hour RTO, all from the Druva console into your own VPC account, and without any need for any hardware on-premise or in your VMC environment. So this is not a lift and shift. This is a truly cloud-based, cloud-native SaaS platform to cover all of this. And when you think around, like, how do you protect your data set in VMware Cloud, there's really three options, right? You back up from VMC onto on-premise. I mean, ultimately, I don't really understand why you would want to do that. You know, you did all the work to shift up, and then to bring all the data back down, you're going to see the same kind of challenges that brought you to VMC in the first place. How do you manage scaling out that infrastructure? How do you ensure there's enough bandwidth to bring all of that data back to premise? You know, you're going to be set with difficulties on the availability for the data protection there on-prem. You know, another strategy is a lift and shift. And with that, you're still managing the backup infrastructure. Maybe you're running it in a VM in VMC, but you still have to deal with, you know, not just the storage, but also the compute, the request costs, scaling that up and down. How do you manage, you know, multiple SDDCs? There's a lot more work involved with that strategy. And then the third option is really where Druva shines, is it's SaaS data protection solution. It's a one-stop shop. It makes it incredibly simple, lowers cost, and gives you what you need without all the hassle and complexity of managing a traditional backup strategy in the cloud. And so when you're protecting VMC, there's obviously some things to consider. You know, whether it's VMware on-cloud or on-premise, you're looking for a backup solution that can protect your workload no matter where it's running. And Druva is going to give you that single pane of glass, a consumption-based pricing model built natively in the cloud, so it's super simple to scale both up and down. And with that global source-side dedupe across all of your VMware data centers, only that unique data is being transferred out, so minimal usage of bandwidth, but still giving you that repository, that historical record, you know, the grandfather, father, son schema that allows you to bring the data back when you want, where you want, quickly. And so with disaster recovery in VMC, it's the same thing. You can either do clusters, you can use a solution like SRM. Costs can be quite high. It's not that that doesn't work. It's just it can certainly add to the complexity and to the cost of management and to the number of you know, human resources and the time that they spend to tackling that challenge. With Druva, again, being SaaS-based, we can fail this over directly into your own VPC. And so just to dive in a bit to the architecture here with the Druva Cloud, again, we're going to connect to that data center workload, whether it's in VMC, on-premise, whether it's databases like SQL or Oracle, deduplicate and compress all of the data source side, only ingest that unique data, only pay for that unique data storage in Druva, and then give you the ability to quickly recover both back to VMC, back to on-premise, or to do DR in your own AWS VPC. And so to go into, you know, kind of a real-life scenario, a use case here, the University of Manchester migrated to VMC, and they were looking for a data protection solution that they were using their on-premise solution for VMC, but they were looking for, you know, a lower cost, easier way to accomplish that. And so they switched over to Druva, backed up over 160 VMs, reduced their storage costs by 50%, and with that 2x deduplication savings, they were only paying for 10 TBs of storage while managing 25 TBs of data locally. They were also able to utilize other AWS services through the disaster recovery to expand their product offerings to their end users. And so to learn more about Druva, we're going to go into a brief demo right here, but we're doing weekly demos every week, Tuesday live. So please check that out, as well as you can see all of the different products on the AWS Marketplace that we offer, whether it's Cloud Ranger to protect your own VPC instance, EC2 RDS Redshift giving you orchestrated DR, point-in-time, file-level, instance-level recovery, as well as our Phoenix solution for both VMC and VMware on-prem and local data center workloads, and then the InSync solution for endpoints or cloud applications like Office 365. So let's jump right into the demo. If you have any questions, please do reach out on the Q&A section.
So let's see how you can deploy an automated and scalable vSphere data protection in minutes with no hardware or software within the Druva platform. So from the Druva dashboard, we're going to go into the Phoenix product. And then from the Phoenix dashboard, you're going to see summary information around the workloads that you're protecting, whether it's physical servers, databases, VMware workloads, NAS devices, as well as local cache. So here, just roughly to kind of explain our source side deduplication, the first backup set protected 1.75 terabytes of data. Now with changes and incremental changes over time, we're seeing that grow to 4.52. Now traditionally, if you were to do archives to the cloud, that data set would compound and compound, or even if you're going to offsite archive media like disk or tape. There's a lot of redundant data stored within that pool. Now with Druva, we're running our global source-based deduplication. So out of this 4.52, we've actually only ingested, we're only storing 718 gigs. Now the benefit to this is that your bandwidth consumption is going to be lower, the backup speed will be improved. This allows the remote-based backup or vCenter or VMC workloads to happen. Now you get to choose exactly where your data goes. Even though the backend storage is managed by Druva, you choose the region, and then we will triplicate that data to 3 data centers within that region. Isolate the metadata in DynamoDB, and so you can have multiple different regions for different business units or different areas to keep with local data sovereignty laws. Now to configure VMware backups, let's quickly talk through the architecture. All you have to do is deploy a proxy. This is a small Linux-based VM. This is not a repository. This is not a virtual appliance. This proxy is used to authenticate to vCenter, authenticate to your Druva cloud instance, cross-reference what data exists in the cloud, run that deduplication, and then send the unique data directly to Druva. It's worth mentioning that with Druva, you can protect both vSphere on-premise, as well as VMware Cloud on AWS and on Dell's cloud. So we're going to choose a workload to protect, click on VMware, download this proxy deployer, copy our token, and then from there, we can get configured. Now, before we do that, I want to talk quickly about the backup proxy pool. And so if you have multiple hosts, if you have hundreds of VMs, you can scale out instead of up. So instead of beefing up a proxy, what you can do is you can have multiple proxies together in a pool. The backup jobs themselves, the deduplication will be load balanced between, and then the data will be deduped and sent directly to Druva's cloud based on the schedule in the policy. So to quickly highlight a policy, if I create a new policy, VMware, this is where we get to select the frequency of the backups, so like when the backups kick off, the max bandwidth of that job, and the frequency. So you can have backups run every day, up to every hour. Remember, it's source-based deduplication, incremental forever backups. And then on the retention, you choose how many dailies, weeklies, monthlies, and yearlies that you need. And if you do have at least one yearly, you can automatically archive older data directly to Glacier with a click of a button, saving you cost on consumption, as well as getting that archive data directly into cold storage. As I mentioned earlier, Druva can back up both vSphere on-premise and in VMware Cloud. All you have to do is check this box if you're using VMC and or put in the FQDN or IP address of the vCenter itself. Input the admin credentials and then determine the location, the data store, the network of the host that you want to deploy this proxy. When you launch this deployer, all you're going to do is set up your vCenter credentials, your data center, your data store, your time zone. Select either a static or DHCP networking. The network itself just needs internet access. You can whitelist star.druva.com for port 443. You paste in that token and you deploy that proxy. Now, once you deploy that proxy, what you'll be able to see within VMware here is that vCenter loaded? All of the VMs listed below. And so to automate deployment here on auto configuration, you can set a rule based on tag, based on folder, based on data store, based on host. VMs will automatically get added, be assigned to a specific storage region, a specific admin group for reporting, a policy for frequency and retention, a proxy pool, and then OS credentials if you're looking to do app-aware backups to isolate SQL data. And so once you set that up, the backups will go automatically. Now, if I go to the Jobs tab here, you can see from VMware all of the backups that have occurred. Now, because we're doing source-based deduplication, because this is just the unique data that's transferred globally, the backups themselves are going to be very fast. The overall amount of data transferred, very little. This efficiency drives both cost benefit from Druva as well as performance. And if I go to that specific VM, say a SQL VM, and I want to restore it back, there's a couple options here. You can do a full VM restore. You can do just a database restore. If I click on VM restore, you have the option of course, individual VMDK files. You can dive into that VM by mounting that VMDK, browse through the folder directory, isolate folders or files that you need to restore them back to the original or to an alternate VM to a CIF share as well. And so you can dive right into the volume, choose what files you need, and then restore that back. Now from the VM level, of course, you can choose any point in time historically. Hot would designate local cache, warm would be S3, cold is Glacier storage. And then if I restore that VM back to the original or to an alternate location and choose the VMware configuration, whether it's the hypervisor, the data store, the network, and rename the VM. Now, being able to restore back to premise or an alternative site is of course valuable, but if you want to do an orchestrated DR failover, you can do a DR plan, and the DR plan would highlight the VM boot order, the instance type, automatically copying the latest VM backups into EBS snapshots within your VPC, making your latest backups available for orchestrated failover in the cloud. Now, the beauty of this is all elastic, it's scalable. You only have to pay for the compute out of AWS if and when you need it, instead of pre-provisioning, pre-purchasing all of the hardware and capacity just to prepare for that worst case scenario. So hopefully this was a good overview of configuring your VMware workloads and how you can automate both the scale and the deployment through our SaaS-based platform. Thank you so much.
Max, are you ready for some Q&A?
Absolutely.
All right, so we have some questions that came in from the audience. The first one is, do I need to have an AWS account to use Druva?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is ultimately no. So the whole solution that Druva offers is built natively on top of AWS as a SaaS offering. So the only vendor you need to work with is Druva. Druva will manage the backend storage, will eat any transfer costs in and out of the platform. So you only have to worry about what you're storing in Druva's platform post deduplication and compression. It's a very simple licensing model.
All right, the next question comes from Hans, and it's, how is data encrypted, and what part of the data does Druva have access to?
Yeah, such a great question. I did put a little blurb, answered that question in the chat there, and provided a link to our website for those that want to read a little bit more. But at the end of the day, so Druva's encryption, what we use is called dual envelope encryption. So there's two keys used to encrypt your data, one of which is encryption key based off of your own admin password that we don't have access to. And so Druva has no backend access to the data that we're managing. Even if we were subpoenaed, there's no way. That's, all the customer's data is logically separated through that strategy. With all great security comes minor inconvenience. So in this case, the minor inconvenience is that we have no way to go into the backend and reset admin passwords. And so, highly advised that folks have two admins set up as, on the instance so that they can access their data or reset a password if someone forgets it. Just to run through some quick certifications, ISO 27001, SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, HIPAA, Trust EU, Safe Harbor. All data in transit's encrypted through the TLS 1.2, AES 256 bit at rest. And all of the data is triple replicated in the cloud to 3 data centers in the region that you choose, utilizing S3 on the back end and can tier back to Glacier for longer term retention.
Very good. This is a good question from Henry. Do you work with just AWS, or can the products work with other cloud providers?
Yeah, it's another great question. So Druva is built natively on AWS as the back end, but we can protect data across any cloud platform that you're using, whether it's a private cloud, whether it's on-premise data center, whether it's in Google Cloud or Azure. We would just connect to those workloads, through our agent, or if it's a specific SaaS application like Salesforce or Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, we can obviously integrate directly into that as well.
And as a reminder to the audience, we do have a poll question up about how you'd like to learn more about Druva. So please, a number of you have already answered, but please make sure you take some time to click an option. And another question we have is, do we need a dedicated network to support Druva?
No. So all of the data transfer is going to be over port 443. And because of the global source side deduplication, all of the data is compressed and deduplicated before leaving the network. And that deduplication is on the block level. And beyond being cool technology, really kind of aids in the efficiency of transfer and then also rolls into lower cost.
Excellent. We have one more question that's come in. Does all of the deduplication happen on premises before traversing the network?
Yeah, absolutely, and kind of ties into my answer on the previous question. So yeah, it's global source-side deduplication. So we're able to index all the metadata, bring the metadata into DynamoDB on the back end is what we're using to hash out those duplicate blocks of data, create that master index, and then only ingest unique data from the source across sites. So that global deduplication could apply to data in VMC. It could apply to data on-prem. If you're managing remote offices as well, it can, that efficiency will obviously play out across that use case as well.
Excellent. It looks like that's all the questions we have. Max, thank you very much as always for participating in today's event. We always like hearing from you.
Absolutely, Scott. Look forward to seeing you at a real-life conference one of these days.
I hope it happens someday.
Thanks again for the time. Yeah, one of these days, I'm sure.
And to our audience, we are going to give away our next gift card. It's a $500 Amazon gift card. And our next winner is Paul Groskopf from Illinois. I hope I got that name right, or Groskopf. I really don't know. We'll be reaching out to you after today's event and with information on how to collect your gift card. And again, please make sure you take a look at the gift card terms and conditions. If you have a question, please make sure you ask it. It could be worth $50. And with that, we're going to turn it over to our next presenter from Gigamon. We have James Mandelbaum, Senior Security Engineer. James, you're here?
I am here.
All right.
As here as I can be, considering we're not in person anymore. I heard that last comment about looking forward to seeing you in person, and I want to be the first person to go up on stage wearing a coat, a tie, and pajama bottoms. I want to be that guy.
So I made the joke, and I'm sorry to say this aside, the other day, that I am convinced the sales of sports coats and shirts and ties are through the roof, and sales of suit pants have been decimated over the past year.
Yeah, but pajama bottoms, if you've got to
Absolutely.
invested in pajama bottoms, you must be doing well.
Absolutely. I'm going to turn it over to you to continue on with a great presentation.
All right, here we go, folks. So as he already said, I am James Mandelbaum. You can call me James. You can call me Jim. You can pretty much call me anything you want. I'll answer. And we're going to talk today specifically around VMware, but everything I'm going to be talking about can really be handled into the cloud pretty much everywhere. But we're going to focus on VMware specifically. We're going to cover terminology. We're going to talk about the visibility gap. We're going to talk about vendor-provided options, and then ultimately what I'm here to talk about, which is packet broker benefits in that virtual space. So before we get started, virtual distributed switches and distributed virtual switches, it's really how they live within your VM infrastructure. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to really just talk about a virtual switch. And we can get deeper if you want to get into how we deal with distributed versus single virtual switches and how we handle them differently in detail, but it really isn't within the scope of what we're talking about today. If we talk about a typical VMware environment, and let's just say we're really simplified in this, but these scale out to hundreds of ESX hosts where I've got a physical layer switch, where I've got an Ethernet connection going into the ESX host, and from there, I've got my underlying OS with a hypervisor, virtual switch, and then all those beautiful VMs running. How do we get into that data? Because one of the things we're always looking for is we're looking for many things. We're looking for bad guy activity. We're looking for runaway apps. We're looking for performance monitoring, scaling, sizing. So what typically happens is we tap that switch, whether we're doing it through a physical tap or we're doing it through a port mirror. Typically what happens is that's where we tap the traffic. The problem is that I lose complete visibility into lateral movement. Now, why does that matter? Well, so first of all, I'm a security guy to my core. So if I'm a bad guy, I am looking for virtual compute. I'm going to make sure I'm not running in a sandbox, but then if I am truly running in a VMware environment, that's great because I can laterally move from host to host to host, and you're never going to see me because that tap point that you are tapping at traditional entry is all going to be encrypted data. And unless you're encrypting and decrypting end-to-end traffic, which is very difficult to do with the new TLS 1.3, it makes it pretty much invisible. So what do? Well, typically, we have to leverage those virtual switches. So we move up the stack, and we start saying, okay, I might tap at the physical, but I'm really better off getting at the virtual because then I can start seeing the lateral movement. So I start seeing activity. So the way we can do it, a lot of people say, well, VMware includes port mirroring, and they absolutely do. So you can go in and you can say, I'm going to grab that traffic from that virtual switch, and I'm going to send it all to a destination, a tool. So the advantage is there. It's free. It's built in. It works. Problem is I only get a single destination. So I don't know about you, but I have more than one tool. Even in my home lab, I have multiple tools. So what do I do with that? The other thing is that it's only local, so within a single host or a single cluster. So if I have vMotion activity where I have apps that either have to scale because of automation or because of a vMotion activity where it has an issue and it gets spun up in another host, I lose it. I don't know what happened to it because I don't see it anymore. And then another thing, and I encourage those of you who are going to challenge me on this, or I always politically incorrect say call BS on me, is packet fragmentation. What happens is that as the traffic gets utilized, it starts fragmenting the packets because of priorities in the queue, and this mirroring is a very low priority. So you will lose traffic just based on priority queues. And I would caution against increasing its priority because moving actual data is more important than getting your mirrors in a production environment. So that's one way you can do it. The most common way is we install agents. So let's say, for example, we go out and we buy a tool, and the tool says you can get all the traffic to the tool if you'll go to each of your hosts and install this agent. Well, it's great because they support it. If I have a problem, I have somebody I can call. I got a throat I can choke and say, fix this. But how does that scale? First of all, if I'm installing agents, do I know what it's going to do to my load? You know, those boxes have finite compute. Those boxes have finite amounts of memory. And so I have to worry about the compute. I have to worry about the overhead because then ultimately this costs me money. What about my apps? Did it create problems with my application? And what about multiple agents? How do I deal with that? Are they competing? And then let's assume that it does work. How do I deploy it? Am I going to go back and hit up every single host and deploy it and then go test it and put it into my gold master that I used to deploy with It's just not a way to go. It does not scale. The other problem is I may have legacy compute out there that doesn't support the agent, but what about vendor-provided VMs? You know, they give me an OVA and I spin it up and I deploy it. I don't have root access. That's a service provided to me as a VM. I don't have the ability to install an agent, so I can't get visibility. So I will tell you, I hate agents. I think agents are a bad recipe. I think it's going to create more pain than they're worth. Another way you could go is virtual tapping. Now, virtual tapping is kind of cool because what virtual tapping is think of it as simply as I'm adding a secondary NIC and I'm taking a copy of all the traffic to and from NIC 1 and sending it over to NIC 2. So it's just a kernel mod. It's not actually an agent. It uses, I say it uses no compute, but it kind of has to use some. But from a measurable perspective, it's just at the kernel level. And it gives you proactive visibility. What the cool thing about that is if I'm doing virtual tapping and I have a vMotion or I have an automation, that's already pre-configured into that kernel. Therefore, it will flow and move with it. So it's kind of cool. It's configurable to the destination. The downsides to this, again, goes down to deployment. How do I go back and get this thing deployed? How do I get it applied to my gold master? And what happens if I change the destination? I've got to go back and change all of them again, unless I have some kind of management against it, which modifies those virtual taps. And again, the same problem with those root access. So it really does create problems unless you can start looking at a different approach. And that is where the Gigamon specialty comes into, and that's that virtual packet broker. And so the virtual packet broker installs as a VM itself into the ESX environment or NSX environment and talks directly to the virtual switch. We take that traffic, we pull it from the virtual switch, and now we can push it out into the physical environment, which means that we can now start saying selectively what traffic goes to what tool. So what's really cool is we can go in and now, once we've got into a virtual packet broker and saying, I want this kind of traffic to go to this tool, I want this kind of traffic to go to that tool, and oh, by the way, I want all the traffic going to this tool. So see it once, use it many, and strategically determine where the traffic goes to the tools because we all have more than one tool. The cool thing about this is we can increase the value to the tool. If I have a tool, for example, that's doing analysis on web traffic, why would I send it anything but web traffic? So today, if you're to send all that traffic to that tool that's doing web analysis, the first thing it has to do is it has to then sessionize the traffic. It has to look at it and say, oh, this has nothing to do with me, and discard it. So that's wasted compute. And what we find is that if we can optimize the tool, we can actually prolong the life of the tool. We have a lot of clients that say to us, my tools are saturated. I need to go expand it. I'm buying additional tools, so I'm now going to load balance it, or I'm going to increase the compute on the tool. And we come back and say, well, wouldn't it be better just to give it better data? And so then you can take and reduce it. So it's all about ROI. When we talk about virtualization, the reason we do it is because we're trying to get better return on investment. So let's try to do the same thing with our tools. You can also do things like load balancing and failover within a packet broker. So you can start looking at that. But more importantly, there are so many things you can do with the traffic itself and manipulate the traffic, such as data deduplication. If I have traffic, and remember, I'm in my picture here, I'm looking at a single instance. That's great, but that's not real world. We have multiple ESX and NSX hosts that we're sending this traffic through, and I may see the same packets multiple times depending upon flow. The tool doesn't need to see it 3-4 times. That's wasted compute. Let's just dedupe it. What about compliance issues? I may have some tools that need to analyze the entire packet, but I may have long-term retention tools like forensics tools that maybe I'm not allowed to for compliance reasons, HIPAA, GDPR, CCPA, you name the stupid acronym soup of compliance, maybe I need to either slice it, which means remove the payload, or mask it, obfuscate it, or maybe I don't need the entire flow. Maybe I just need sample because I'm looking at performance. I can selectively do sample flows. Again, it's about improving the quality of the data to the tool. We can generate net flow. Imagine, we're used to looking at net flow from a physical layer. But what about the virtual? How do you understand who's talking to who, who's my top talkers, who's talking to somebody they shouldn't be talking to? Is it normal from VM A to talk to VM B? Well, I don't know. It might be, but it might not. And I might want to know, okay, there's a certain amount that's normal, but all of a sudden I have huge amounts of communication. Probably something we need to look at. So we can generate net flow within the VM environment. And again, that selective flow, sending the right data to the right tool. The other thing is that, there's always a disadvantage. So licensing costs. You have to license that virtual packet broker. So we'll come back to that in a second. But the other piece here, that as you start looking at your virtual packet broker, and yes, we are Gigamon, and I'm here, of course, to plug Gigamon, but there are other companies that do this as well. So the one thing I would say is as you do this, do you live in a monolithic world? In other words, is my only compute living in VMware, or do I also have Nutanix, OpenStack, AWS, Azure, Google? If I run my compute in a multi-cloud environment, a hybrid approach, make sure whatever you're doing in this virtual packet broker supports all of your instances and all of your compute environments, because otherwise it didn't really solve your problem, because now I have multiple tools to solve multiple problems. So whatever it is, make sure, and of course Gigamon, obviously that's a leader. We do that. So we're not limited only to VMware, which means the same rules, the same policies, the same capabilities can apply to AWS, Azure, Google, all of that. And the other thing is that you do have to spin up these VMs. So there is a certain amount of cost to the compute to spin up that additional VM. When I talked about licensing costs, I always bring up the fact that ROI. You heard me talk about the fact of trying to get the right data to the right tool. And if I can eliminate data from the tool that's not relevant, I can prolong the life of the tool. I can stop you from having to expand it or buy additional. What we have found when we're doing this, when we do these virtual packet brokers and we have these tools, by the way, the tools don't have to be physical. The tools can be virtual. So we can send it to physical and virtual. That's something really cool. Usually this solution pays for itself in an average 6 to 7 months, and then it just becomes gravy because of the ROI we can bring for those tools. The other thing that we talk about is best practices. And this is my last slide, so I'm going to let you guys stare at it for a minute. But it's important to understand from a security perspective and the move to zero trust. If I'm somebody that's looking at this, and I have sat in that seat, I have run global infrastructure for a large company, I looked at this and said, what kind of rights do people really need to my infrastructure? So if I take and put a compute zone, and if we were looking in AWS, these would be VPCs, but if I have a compute zone where I have all my ESX hosts, and I have packet brokers running there, and I do what I would consider this a tap and add perspective, which means I'm tapping all the traffic in my compute VM environment, and I'm filtering and only grabbing the traffic that I want, and then I send that off to another zone, which I call my tool zone, which I may have virtual tools living in there, and I may have connections from there out to existing physical tools. And I only give my security teams rights to that virtual environment. That means they don't have direct access into the operational environment. So production is managed by the networking or the virtual team, the tool zone can be accessed by security, which means they can do whatever they want in that environment. They can break and fix and mess around in there. And the important thing here is they're not going to bring down production. So all of the data is flowing into that virtual packet broker in the tool zone. They can change the destinations, they can change the rules, they can change the policies, and not impact production. And this is really a best practices kind of thing. So at that point, I'm done. There is a link at the bottom of the screen right here. There's an ebook. It's really short. You can kind of get an idea. It talks about the top problems people have when they're moving to the cloud or looking at the cloud. I encourage you to take a look at it. It'll take 5 minutes of your life. I also do a plug if you're a Twitter follower, grab me and follow me on Twitter. I put stuff up occasionally. At this point, I'm open to questions.
All right, we have a few questions that have come in, but first I'm going to launch our final poll question. And it's How would you like to learn more about Gigamon? So while we're doing Q&A, we'll ask our audience to answer a question for us as well. Our first poll question is, how does the Gigamon cloud offering differ from some of its competitors out there? I'm not going to name the competitors.
Yeah, so I don't need to name the competitors. I think one of the things that's unique about Gigamon's cloud offering is we have a single SKU. So you buy what we call Hawk, it's our V series, and you deploy it into the cloud environment you want. So if I have VMware, I deploy it into VMware. If I have AWS, the single SKU allows me to also deploy it in AWS, and you only pay for consumption. So if I'm moving compute from one location to another, my charges didn't change. It's based on consumption. We're not limiting you to where you deploy it and how you get the tapping and the filtering and the flows. We let you choose where you want to put it and only pay for consumption, which means you don't have to go back to the well to try to get more money to buy another license.
All right. We have another question here. I'm going to read this. Might take a second to read. It's from Hans. Can the solution cover hybrid cloud, on-prem, VMware, and Azure? What can I move? This is a weird sentence. The sentence is not quite right. When can I move from VM to on-prem to Azure? Or I guess can I? I'm not quite sure what that last sentence is trying to say. But the solution, the big question is, can you cover hybrid cloud scenarios?
Absolutely, and that's kind of one of the things I said in the first one is that the one single offering allows you to deploy into that full hybrid environment. So, you know, in my lab, if you want to see it, by the way, Hans, I'm glad to demo it. In my environment, I have AWS, VMware, OpenStack, and Azure all running in a single dashboard, and I can create flows from one to the other. Now, it's important to understand something, though. If I have virtual tools and I deploy them up in the cloud and sending data from on-prem to the cloud, that's not a big deal. If I have on-prem tools and I want to pull data from AWS or Azure, for example, down into my on-prem, it is a big deal, not from our perspective, but from the cloud perspective. Understand how cloud prices. They say you can give us data all day long for free. Send that data up to the cloud. But if you want to pull it back out and use it, now you got to pay. So part of the thing in architecting a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud offering is to optimize where your tools live, where your data flows, how you manipulate the data. And yes, to your point, we operate extremely well in a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment because of the fact that single offering and the single way of building the flows applies across all of them.
All right, we have another question. How do I connect my tools to the V-Series if they're virtual as well?
Great question. So one of the things that we do is everything is sent out through tunnels because that's the only way we can send the traffic so it can be routed to the destination. So if you have a tool that is virtual, most tools that are virtual are expecting the traffic to be tunneled to them. So we would just send the IP address destination of the tool and encapsulate it in a tunnel, a GRE tunnel, for example, and send it directly to the tool. The tool would receive the tunnel, decapsulate it, and off it goes.
All right. Next question is, can you deploy it to multiple instances or vendors? I'm not sure if that question makes sense, but I'll let you decide if that does or not.
Multiple
I think different clouds.
Different clouds.
Must be multiple cloud instances.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, for us, the single SKU, we have clients that have different. For example, if you're looking, let's look at this like I know this is really VMware, but it's kind of easier if we think of it AWS, where I have different VPCs and I deploy it into different VPCs, and then maybe use a transit gateway to move the data, or it's just straight tunnels sending the traffic somewhere. But we absolutely can deploy to multiple instances, multiple environments. Again, that single license, because we don't care how many environments you install it to. It's just based on the aggregate of the data you're sending through to your tools. We make it really, really simple.
We have another question, and it's around XDR, or Extended Detection and Response. How can Gigamon help customers develop XDR capabilities?
Really good question. So one of the things that when you think about, for example, if we're talking XDR, and XDR is the combination of endpoint, EDR, and it's a combination of NDR, which is network. We're really going to help you on the NDR side of it, because when you look at XDR, you've got to combine what's happening on the endpoints, and you've got to take a look at what's happening with the data in motion, right? Because we always say data in motion is the ultimate truth. So if I need to get that data, how do you get it without doing what we do, which is tapping the actual data in motion and sending it to your sensor? So most XDR solutions have sensors. And what they do is they receive that raw packet data, and then they generate metadata and send it up. So what we can do is, to us, that's a destination tool. So we can tap all the traffic, whether we're talking VMware, which is what we're talking right now, but it can also be Nutanix, OpenStack, of all the three big ones on the on-prem, and then the public cloud, the three big public clouds, including, Alibaba and Oracle, if you want to go there. But all of those, we can actually take all of that and send it to your sensor, which then feeds to your XDR. But your data, when you look at your XDR, your data is only as good as the feed it's getting. And that's what we help you do. It gets the more data and the more relative data you have, the better you get at finding those needles.
Excellent. So we have to ask the CFO question. How does Gigamon help me provide an ROI that I can prove to my CFO?
Good question. So one of the things I would say to you is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a plug for our ROI calculator. If you go to gigamon.com, you will find an ROI calculator, and you can use the basic mode, which kind of just asks you, how much bandwidth are you using, how many tools do you have, and it's very basic, and it'll show you what your payback is. But if you click through that, you'll see it can get very detailed. It can ask you, exactly what tools do you have, how much bandwidth are you seeing to those tools, what's its saturation point, and we can actually provide you an ROI that's real. And the way we do that is, again, sending the right traffic to the right tool. If we can filter out high volume, low value, such as if I have, we're all working from home, we're all on VPNs, we're doing things, we take a break and we start doing streaming media, or we have in the background, we have streaming audio, music, whatever. That stuff doesn't really need to be seen by the security tools. Let's get rid of that high volume, low value stuff right off the bat. Then we can start looking and saying, look, I don't need backup data sent to my tools. Let's get rid of the backup data. If you start thinking about all that stuff on your network I don't want to send to my tool, you can really make your tool more efficient, and you can prolong the life of that tool. So ROI for us is actually very easy to prove. We have that tool, a calculator on gigamon.com that you can use. And if you really want somebody, one of us, one of us can actually walk you through the details on it and show you, and then it'll generate a PDF so you can actually walk into your CFO and see it and show it. But the numbers are real. And the reason they're real is they weren't developed by us. They were developed by a third party. And so the numbers are valid, and it's really easy to prove.
That's great. Yeah, that's one of the challenges with some of the ROI calculators. I'm glad to hear that you have had it developed and embedded by a third party. That adds a lot of credibility. So thank you for letting us know about that. James, that's all the questions we have. Thank you, as always, for that fantastic presentation from Gigamon.
Thank you for letting me. It was fun.
And we're going to move on with our final gift card drawing of today's event. And our winner there is, you want to tell a joke first? You want to know who won? I'm kidding. I don't know any good jokes. This is a great name, Jimmy Arcade from California. You'll be the winner of our third gift card. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be reaching out to you after today's event. For those of you who don't know us, want to learn more about Actual Tech Media and our great clients, please subscribe to our 10 on Tech podcast everywhere podcasts are sold. And if you are a vendor watching today's event and you'd like to sponsor one, our EcoCast, the MegaCast, Summit, Discovery Days, whatever, or just a regular old everyday webinar, please email connect@actualtechmedia.com. We'd love to chat with you. And for our audience, we have another great event coming up shortly here, another week or so, and you'll be hearing from, actually, I believe Gigamon has been added to this one as well, supporting and enabling modern applications. You'll be hearing from some great new vendors, including Lightbits and AirKit, but in addition to Zerto, Scale Computing, Pure Storage, and OutSystems. So we're very much looking forward to that. We thank you to our audience for participating today. If you were a prize winner, you'll be reached out to after today's event. And as always, thank you for joining us, and please stay safe